Morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel session where we will discuss the exciting and dynamic topic of small satellites. We have a lineup of great panelists with us here today representing the SmallSat ecosystem. But before jumping into the panel discussion, I'm going to leave the floor to my colleague, Alexander Najjar, Senior Consultant at Euroconsult, who is going to give us a short overview of the market prospects for the SmallSat sector. So Alex, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Natalia, for your introduction. My name is Alexander Najjar. I am a senior consultant here at Euroconsult. And it is my honor and pleasure today to present a few key figures on the SmallSat market to introduce our distinguished speakers. So the data presented today is extracted from our prospects for the small satellite market research report, some of you might be familiar with. Which covers basically everything in the SmallSat sector, from trends to supply and demand sustainability, constellation maturity assessment, including market forecasts 10 years into the future, as well as detailed analysis of the past 10 years. So just because it's 5 minutes is too short to present everything I want to tell you, so I highly recommend having a look at the report. So now let's dig into the data. So we anticipate small satellite demand to grow, well, not significantly, which would be a euphemism. We expect it to grow fivefold from one decade to the other. Obviously driven by the constellation market, as a few key players will hyper concentrate demand about half of the market, and as dozens of constellations begin their rollout. But this is just one part of the big picture here. As basically, this is just the numbers of satellites, and obviously, if the same analysis in satellite mass and market value would obviously give different results. As we mentioned in the report, because the average cost basically to manufacture a commercial SmallSat as part of a constellation is on average a lot less than government satellites, for example, or single satellite missions. So to have some view at the past year, well, it was a record year despite the COVID-19 pandemic. For the first time in history, actually, over 1,000 satellites were launched. We are actually closer to 1,100 as of today, since the latest PSLV and Electron launch, were not counted within this chart. So Starlink, as you can see, in 2020, we presented the 3/4 of the demand. It's the big elephant in the room. And I think it's representative of a key trend in the industry, which is vertical integration and in-house manufacturing and launch. So obviously, Starlink was not the first player to vertically integrate the production and launch of satellites, but they are taking it to another level. And as you can see, this has a big impact on the data. So to summarize the impact of COVID in a few points, so obviously there were significant manufacturing delays and spaceport closures, for example, in Guyana due to the pandemic. India as well stopped launching for several months. They only went back to launch last week. Government priorities shift as well, not only because of elections, but because of budgets and because of health or education being sometimes the newest priority in the pandemic context. And we also noticed a few bankruptcies, sometimes due to investor reluctance or basically due to better investing opportunities elsewhere, and a big stress on the return on investment of their space investment. Another important factor to discuss is the development of micro launchers. So I retained a selection because obviously there's hundreds in development. I figured this would be of interest to our panelists, as some are included here, some have partnerships with some players here, also our competitors. So several players have attempted to reach orbit and to begin their operational service phase. And this trend is expected to keep growing despite competition to be expected and evidently pressure on prices. So this is it for my brief introduction, and pass the floor back to Natalia and to our speakers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alex, for the presentation. Great overview of the market. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists. So we have with us today Dan Hart, President and CEO of Virgin Orbit, Sir Martin Sweeting, Chairman and CEO of SSTL, Angelo Fontana, Vice President of Business Development at Avio, Alexander Serkin, CEO of UK Launch, and Mikhail Kokorich, CEO of Momentus. So thank you all for joining us today. Just as a reminder for our audience, if you have questions for our panelists, please write your questions in the chat and the application at any time during the session. Now, to open the discussion, I would like to start by asking each of our panelists what have been the key recent achievements and upcoming milestones for the companies. So starting with Dan, you have an important milestone later this year with your second demonstration orbital flight. So can you tell us more about what have been the key events for Virgin Orbit and your upcoming milestones?
Well, it's been an incredible year for Virgin Orbit. You know, as you know, we're an air-launched small satellite launcher. So we fly up on a 747 and deploy our rocket, which deploys the payloads. A very flexible system that can fly from anywhere to any orbit. And it's been an incredible year for us. Of course, we've all dealt with COVID, which started out an incredible year in a lot of tough ways. So we all had to learn how to operate. We were in the middle of preparing for our first launch when the pandemic hit. So we had to not only finish the development of a system, but develop a new way to operate within going to first launch within this whole different environment. But we did our first launch in May, on May 25th. We were able to really verify the whole air launch concept after months and months of rehearsals and developing the system. We were proud to say that on our very first launch attempt, we went out and we were able to fly. Really a testament to the team and also the flexibility of the system to maneuver, get above, and deploy the rocket and the payload. We did have an issue on the way up. Our performance was great as we separated from the airplane, started the engines, flew along our trajectory, but we did have a component failure. We've since recovered from that. Our rocket is about to leave the factory later this week, head up to Mojave for a second launch with a NASA payload, hopefully by the end of the year. So we're really looking forward to flying to orbit before the year ends.
Great, thanks. Alexander, you announced earlier this year your lunar rideshare program. So can you tell us more about that and any other recent or upcoming success for GEK launch that you would like to share?
Yes, thank you. First of all, hello to everyone. It's nice to be here with you today. So I'd like to start with some general updates on the Russian launch industry. We have had a second consecutive year with 100% success rate, which is great news for us. That includes all Soyuz 2 vehicles of our family, and also Proton. Recently, our mother company, GloveCosmos, has successfully delivered the service for some rideshare satellites flying together with Roscosmos payload. That actually happened in September, and I'm happy to announce that next year we're going to have the same opportunity that we're ready to propose to the market. So it will be a federal mission flying in the autumn, where we can propose some seats for the international market. Another great achievement we had, that is Soyuz 2.1A, which is a core element of our business. It became, manned qualified. So it has flown with Soyuz ship with people, and so we're proposing that vehicle to the market. So great news for us. We have secured some orders on the international market on both ride shares and some bigger satellites since the last time we met at Euroconsult. Further improved our teamwork with ILS and signed some cooperation agreements. And now we're have a capability to offer to our customers some flexible solutions, which includes different launch vehicles such as Proton, Soyuz 2 family, and Angara, which is coming shortly. Yeah, we have, on the negative side, we had to delay our first commercial mission, which was actually supposed to be flying this month from Baikonur. Due to the COVID impacts, that was moved to the first quarter next year. So currently we're targeting March for that flight, and we will have a lot of satellites there, including the primary payload from Korea, called CAS 501 satellite. But generally, I feel the industry is coming back to life, so hopefully next year meeting in Paris. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Angelo, what about Avio? What has been keeping you busy, and what is in the pipeline for you?
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to everybody. Well, I would say that the major achievement that we have in 2020 has been our successful return to flight after we experienced the 15th flight anomaly in July 2019. And of course, we are very happy about that. It took more than 1 year to get back to flight, out of which 7 months to understand the anomaly and implement corrective actions, and other 7 months of delay because of the pandemic, first of all, but also for some weather issues. We finally managed to fly on September 3, and we had a great innovation on board of Vega. This flight indeed marked the first European rideshare mission. And we were able to carry more than 50 small satellites, and this was possible thanks to a specific structure called the SSMS that we conceived to accommodate and provide service to a bunch, let's say, generally speaking, of small satellites. Again, it was the first time for Europe to fly a pure rideshare mission, and now we look forward to our 17th flight slated for November 16. I would also add to this, our second great achievement was the static test of the P120 solid rocket motor on October this year in French Guiana. For all of those who don't know what the P120 is, well, it is the common element between Vega C and Ariane 6, so the future of the European fleets of launchers. It will be the first stage of Vega C and the solid booster for Ariane 6. And this marked, we completed the ground qualification of this model. So now we are ready, and this is the second target, the second achievement that we will have in the next year. We are ready to fly the Vega C, let's say by mid of 2021. Finally, I cannot help mentioning the development contracts for our future activities. If we go back to 2019, ESA ministers endorsed the most ambitious plan for the future of the whole European sector, and in particular, Italy committed on an extraordinary contribution that will allow us to finish, to go at completion with Vega E, which is a further evolution of Vega C, and the Space Rider, which is the European re-entry vehicle. So I will stay on this, and let's keep in mind that the evolution of the European fleet is going on, and at a rapid pace. So thank you.
Great. Sir Martin, SSTL has been very active. So what would you highlight as the most significant recent events for your company, and what's next for you?
All right, Natalia, my mute button is being a bit slow. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Okay, so yeah, very good afternoon to everybody. It's nice to be with you. Of course, Paris would be even nicer, but this is a very good second best. As we've seen from Alexandra's introduction, yeah, the small satellite market has really grown dramatically over the last 5 or so years, and SSTL still remains as relevant as ever in producing turnkey as a satellite provider for LEO satellite operators and government customers. 2018-19 was a very busy year for us. We launched and took into operation 23 satellites on 9 different launches for different customers. And our business continues despite the restrictions of COVID. Of course, that has slowed us down, and we'll probably talk a bit more about that later. But our Novasar and S14 Earth observation satellites are both both operational. The SAR and the optical satellites flying together to provide us with combined optical radar data, AIS information. Our project with JISTA in Thailand, TS2, is progressing well. Smallsat 7, the constellation for Taiwan, has been brought into operational service. And of course, we've been delivering Galileo payloads, 34 payloads to date, and that first batch of Galileo payloads now nearing completion. So that's been keeping us very busy. Nevertheless, we're still trying to look for new business ideas and innovation, and we've just started our work on the Lunar Communication Service, which was recently approved. So this is going to provide us with a new beyond LEO business opportunity, which we're driving forward. And then a technology that we've been developing over the last decade, which is using passive GNS reflectometry to pioneer this application for monitoring not just ocean wave heights, but also soil moisture and sea ice. And we're now working with ESA to try to turn this into an operational science constellation. And then on the technical side, we've been focusing on our Carbonite series of dark carb infrared and carb SAR, small SAR, and true color spacecraft, and developing deployable telescopes in orbit with software-defined payloads. So we've been keeping pretty busy over the last 2 years. COVID, of course, has slowed things down a little bit this year, but we've kept up the pace and managed that. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you. Mikhail, you have been also quite busy at Momentus with the announcement of your IPO and signing multiple contracts. So can you elaborate more on the status of that and what has been the most significant events for your company?
Yeah, thank you. And like Martin Swearing, I also miss in Paris. I would love to be now there. And unfortunately, with this coronavirus, we are without this like a annual trip to the best city in the world. So for sure, last couple of years was very important for the company because we've basically been building our technology, our customer base, and our new business model, and also the team. So, and just like to remind what we are doing. So we basically dramatically reducing satellite operator launch cost and expanding deployment option for a given spacecraft. So we can be paired with a large or medium-sized reusable rockets like Falcon 9, and we can offer last mile delivery to a wide range of orbits. This allows us to offer the affordable, flexible, hub and spoke logistics model to move satellites and cargo in space. And we use transfer vehicles that we designed and built to move satellites from initial drop-off orbit to a variety of final destination. We are starting with a single-use, expendable transfer vehicle, but definitely eventually we would like to transition to a reusable one that we can refuel in space. We're making our first commercial, but still test flight December this year on a rideshare mission with SpaceX, where we deliver 9 satellites for 7 customers to orbit. And next year we are flying on 3 missions. And on the last mission, we will be flying with multiple vehicles in December of next year. So we will be delivering satellites to 3 different orbital planes and to multitude of different altitudes. And we also lucky to get multiple customers. We have now dozens and dozens customers, which include NASA, for whom we also deliver satellites to space, and Lockheed Martin, with whom we have actually 2 different deals, not only delivering satellites, but also providing satellite as a service, basically offering the not only last mile delivery, but also hosted payload service. Also important that we've been growing as a company. We get amazing team. Rob Schwartz, former CTO of Maxar Satellite, joined us. Don Harms, she was the head of the sales and Boeing commercial satellites. And finally, Fred Kennedy, who was the founder, the founding director of Space Development Agency, joined us as a president. And we're definitely excited to move forward with our technology, because the vehicles that we are building with these capabilities wouldn't be impossible to build without actually real disruption on technology. And without microwave electrothermal propulsion, which has been developed for many years but never was flown in space until last year tested in space, it's really allow us to move further with the cost level and also performance of our vehicles.
Great. So thank you all for sharing all these updates, and congratulations in all these milestones, especially in this challenging year. So we will talk more in detail about COVID-19 pandemic. But before that, as we saw in the presentation before, the smallsat market is going through a significant expansion, right? But at the same time, we have also seen this drastic increase in the number of smallsat manufacturers and launcher access to space service providers. So a key question that many people have is whether we have, or we could have, an oversupply, right, of smallsat manufacturing and launch capabilities. So I would like to ask Angelo, do you think there is an oversupply of launch capabilities, and how does Avio adapt to this evolving market?
Right. I don't think we will see an oversupply, and I'm going to say why. So we saw from Alexander's presentation that the number of orbited satellites is quite, it seems to boom in 2020, but most of them, 3/4 of them, are due to the Starlink constellation deployment. So there is no boom to my view, and that said, we believe that today the offer, namely the launch vehicle, is adequate compared to the request, namely the small satellites. Why am I saying so? Because along with some mini launch vehicles that are operational today, especially considered to serve the small sat markets, we see that both heavy and medium light launch vehicles are introducing more and more services and solutions for small sats. Indeed, what we are experiencing today is a huge differentiation. On one side, we have new services, so not only piggyback, but also rideshare, like we did. On the other side, we have new launch vehicles. So operational and under development mini launch vehicles that can offer a dedicated services. So if we take the whole package into consideration, we believe that the request is adjusted to the offer for the time being. What will happen in the future, we don't know, but you know, it's the market itself that will adjust the demand and the offer. What about us? Avio has already differentiated its offer and will continue to. First of all, our rideshare mission, we did it 2 months ago. Then piggyback solutions, because with BigIC we will be able to fly many configurations, and one of these configurations is a big satellite on top and a bunch of small satellites on a deck, on a ring. So this to fill up our residual capacity, if any. we will have the Space Rider. So all those payloads that want to have a 2 months experience in orbit and then get back to Earth. And we will have in our plans a dedicated solution. So our plan is to derive a small launch vehicle from the big one, from Vega. And let's say that we don't talk too much about this for the time being. This is an industrial initiative for the time being that Avio is working along with the Italian stakeholders. So what we have to keep in mind at the very end, our added value is that by that time, when we will have Space Rider and a dedicated solution, we will have a portfolio covering all the possible services, from piggyback to rideshare to dedicated to return to Earth. And I think this will be a very unique service that we can offer to our customers.
Dan, what's your views on this? Do you think that there is enough demand to sustain the small sat launch market? And how does Virgin Orbit differentiate?
You know, if you look at the market, as you mentioned up front, we're in a development mode. There are a lot of ideas. There's a burst of innovation happening across the industry, and it's fantastic. Will all of these ideas come to fruition? Of course not. We've got startups starting all over the place, and the companies that differentiate themselves and exploit those differentiations are the ones that are going to be successful. It's just a classic developing market. We at Virgin Orbit differentiate ourselves by operating with the flexibility and mobility of an airplane. And so, you know, from the days that a few aerospace engineers came to Cape Canaveral to work on rockets in the 1960s, the dream has been, how do we operate these with the ease and the flexibility that we have on aircraft? And that's what we've done. We can not only launch from up here in California, we can fly across the ocean and launch from any country and bring launch globally. And I think as we look forward, we're going to see customers that are more demanding in the commercial sector who want to get to their orbit and don't have a lot of patience or time to get there. They want to go to the specific orbit they want to go to. We'll see governments who want to have orbit that launch that don't necessarily want to ship their spacecraft to another country to launch. And we're going to see innovation and ideas that are triggering off of each other. And if you look at spacecraft and launch development, they've always had sort of a cyclical relationship to where new capabilities and ideas in one area, in one sector, spawn innovation and value in another. It's an exciting time.
Yes, indeed. Sir Martin, talking about the manufacturing side, so do you think there are too many players? And what are the key differentiation factors? Is it just price, or what other factors are critical to differentiate?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, SSTL, in one sense, was perhaps the original new space company when we started back in 1985, when small satellites were considered at best a waste of time, and there were people who were less charitable than that. And over the following decades, we've seen their capabilities grow, and rather like the way the PC market grew, small satellites are now a ubiquitous capability, and we're seeing a wide range of applications. So when you see the tremendous growth in startups and not just actually small startups, but also big industries, established industries coming down and developing small satellite capacity and services, I think clearly there's going to be a considerable amount of consolidation that will appear over the next few years. But I encourage as many of these startups and satellite manufacturers and subsystem manufacturers as possible, because this is the best way to get innovation, because new ideas will be stimulated by this. And of course, there will be, in due course, some consolidation as the total small satellite community matches the requirements of the market. But this is a natural process, and hopefully through that we'll get some really interesting ideas. This is on the spacecraft side, and we will see the same on the launcher side. And indeed, the UK is looking at the launcher side in conjunction with some colleagues, including Dan. And so, this is a really exciting time. The more, the merrier.
Talking now about the current global context, as we all know, and you already touched that topic. So we are living unprecedented times with the COVID-19 pandemic. So all organizations around the world have been impacted in one way or another. So Alexander, to what extent has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the demand for your company?
Well, first of all, mostly business operations, I would say. So we have, of course, we had a tremendous impact on the space industry, and we have seen the effect on the international logistics, the absence of the meetings or possibility to conduct some meetings which are essential for the business or the preparation of some missions that we have to perform. There was this pause. So now we feel like it's getting, we get to know the situation. So it's easier these days to plan things. Our government and Roscosmos plays a huge role in that, supporting foreign personnel coming to Russia for some joint operations, and especially the custom launch service, launch activities, which is essential for our business. So market feels like starting to get back on track again. Fingers crossed, and unfortunately, we don't expect this process to be fast. So but it's not going to be the same for quite a while. And the government role in this period is going to be a key factor, I believe. But again, first of all, we have to pass this pandemic and get back on track again.
Angelo, what about Avio? Can you elaborate more on the impacts of the pandemic for your company? I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I was saying that I've recently heard that satellite manufacturers consider that despite the pandemic, their sector is growing, and they even expressed the optimism that the demand for satellite would remain strong, let's say. And this is very important, an important factor for us, because we rely on satellites to have our launch activities. Global, the launch activities is not suffering from the pandemic in terms of number of launches. As of today, we have some 85, if I'm not wrong, launches, sustained above all by Falcon 9 and Chinese launch vehicles. This is not true for all launch service providers, because, Indian launchers flew a couple of days ago for the first time this year. As far as we, Avio, are concerned, I would say that, I said before that we were impacted with, let's say, a 3-4 months delay respect to the Arianespace manifest for our flights. And this is not only delay, but also costs, because, we have to face additional costs to keep our teams safe, not only in Italy, but also all those people who travel to French Guiana, for example, to carry out launch campaigns. So today a campaign, it's more difficult, it's longer, it's more expensive as well. So delay and costs, I think, are the major impacts. I've been told that there will not be a direct impact on satellite orders, but it's the other way around. So it is important for us.
Mikhail, following this topic and thinking about like moving forward. So the space industry, okay, it's recovering for the pandemic, but some people might argue that with this global crisis, the plans of multiple smallsat operators might face challenges to materialize. So in your view, how the demand for your organization will evolve in the near and medium term?
Yeah, so definitely all these restrictions affected business, specifically on our production manufacturing side, because with the CDC limitations, we were not able to put all the people like in our office, and so we push a lot of people working at home, so we can have satellite spacecraft integration team working in our like facility. But now we're moving to much larger facility, so it will help us to operate basically with all the team inside the building. We actually didn't see too much effect on our customer base. We had a couple customers who asked us to move from December flight to next flight, but it was a small number of really like customers who really have these problems. And I think like what we see that it's a pretty amazing number of different companies in all different countries who is starting to explore different entrepreneurial journeys and different services in a space. And it's very different because like we are located here in like a Silicon Valley. And when you look at the software, most of the companies actually tend to finally move to Bay Area. But in a space world, it's not, and we see many companies in many different countries, like you can name it, Poland, Lithuania, Bulgaria, United Kingdom, Singapore, Taiwan, and we see that a lot of what we call national pride money start to invest in different satellite concepts, and companies tend to stay in their countries and develop satellite, spacecraft, space capabilities because they're supported by national business and national governments. And this is very different from other, let's say, new industries. We are very bullish on this because we see that the demand of these companies for the services. And what we see that actually space industry is moving the same way like many hardware industries moved from basically buying and selling hardware to buying and selling service. Now, almost nobody building their own ground stations. People use like ground station networks. And we see like all these hosted payload concepts. So people start to use even spacecraft bus as a service. And we will see that it will be proliferation of this stuff, especially because people need to compete with large vertically integrated companies in a cost, and they will start to use standardized bus or standardized services to run their own like services, to run their own payloads.
So, Sir Martin, talking about also moving forward, what are the overall risks and opportunities that you foresee for the smallsat market?
Sorry, I missed the very beginning of that.
Yes, so talking about the moving forward, so what are the key risks and opportunities that you foresee in the smallsat market?
Well, I mean, assuming that we can get over the pandemic effects, and I mean, certainly for us, we were quite fortunate in that we were instilled a very strict regime, and so we in the facilities here, so we were able to continue our fabrication and operations pretty well without missing a beat. But there's no doubt that one of the things that this is affecting is, and whilst these virtual conferences are fantastic, we do miss the sort of serendipitous discussions that would happen in the interstitial parts of the conference. And certainly what I've seen is that there's been a bit of a slowdown in the decision making on a number of international projects and customers, and that's certainly having a bit of effect. If we look ahead, as I said earlier, I think there's going to be a consolidation in the overall market, but I think that we will see coming out of that a number of new and exciting applications which we will drive forward. In terms of the technologies that we see, I think that if we look ahead in the small satellite area, perhaps 5 to 10 years, it is going to be the implementation of space robotics in orbit that is going to make the most fundamental change, and how we design, build, launch spacecraft into Earth orbit and beyond. And so I think those are some of the big opportunities that we see, but that's in the sort of 5-year downstream period.
Perfect. So several of you already mentioned government contracts and government agencies. So talking about the role of the government. So Dan, in your view, what is the role that the government should play to foster a small sat market?
Space has always been a sort of a triangle between science and exploration, commercial endeavors, and national security and safety. And it certainly is now. I mean, all of the large rockets have had government participation. Many constellations do. Many commercial companies for space services have government as one of their anchor customers, and that will be the way it is for a long time. It's a healthy environment that we have right now, where we've seen over the last few years the commercial sector moved out primarily and created platforms with private investment and in the small satellite sector, and now governments are making use of those. So we see NASA as a key customer as they transform their earth science programs and a lot of their heliophysics programs, and even some of their interplanetary programs to small platforms. National security is in a whole new era right now, with the realization that space is unfortunately a contested regime, and there's a need for resilience. Our system is perfectly situated for that, with our mobility, our ability to distribute launch across the globe, not be tied to a landmass or a place that has a vulnerability from natural disasters like hurricanes or weather, as well as any mischief from human beings. So, you know, I see government as a natural partner, and the key is for government to be a smart buyer, to really look at systems that fulfill their requirements and differentiate, as well as fuel innovation. But the only thing that we don't want government to do is create large monopolies that stifle innovation, and history shows some of that in the past. And I think generally government is aware of that and is doing a relatively good job. The other thing I'd say that we're going to see coming up is more international collaboration and cooperation, where allied countries will collaborate more and more in space, and hopefully that will bond the world together in new ways. And we look forward to participating with countries across the globe to provide them launch from their shores as a way to collaborate.
Mikhail, what's your view on this? What is the role that the government should play to enable the development of an organization like yours? It's also as a customer, as an enabler, all the above.
The government playing an important role in the space industry as a large customer, as a regulator of the industry, and finally also as a player. We definitely see the government being our customer, especially for the service, and we would like to promote the service model. We think that finally for government buying the services, it's a better model to empower entrepreneurship and empower the companies and unlock creativity of different companies rather than tell what to do and what to build. And we're trying now to have relation with the government when government actually buying our services. And I think this is the healthiest relations. We also see that it will be big changes in regulation. It's probably connected with the increasing worry of the potential debris problem, and it was like a talks for many years about this, but now the largest space nations start to actually move in this direction, and we are part of this big discussion through Commerce Department and FCC about this problem, and we see that potentially in the next few years it will be more tightened regulation about space debris, which kind of create definitely additional burden, but also opportunities for the business to build different services, how to handle and how to solve this problem.
All right, just a quick reminder for the audience, if you haven't sent your questions for our panelists, please do so if you have through the chat. Talking now more in detail about changes in the market. So we've been talking about increased competition, innovation, there are new market applications, increased consolidation, and so on. So Alexander, how all these ongoing changes in the industry that at the end translate in, as we said, increased competition, lowering costs, and so on, impact your business, and how do you adapt?
Well, yeah, well, how long? But probably a year or year and a half. That's what we thought. The industry started to change. The competitive environment is started to change as well. So in fact, we trust and rely on Euroconsult figures, not only because Euroconsult is Euroconsult, but also because it corresponds to our feeling, our view on what's going on the market. So I agree with what other panelists mentioned today, that there is definitely a growth on the smallsat industry. In the smallsat industry, we see growing number of customers, new players, startups coming up with new initiatives, new programs, and new constellations in discussions, but as well, there is some kind of a harmony, I would say, with the supply on the launch services side for the time being. Because when we look at the forecast and we see the significant growth in 2-3 years from now in number of satellites, that means that we are already speaking to most of them today, because this is the time, 1 or 2, 3 years before the launch, this is the time you start talking to the community, to the customers, providing them some offers or launch services solutions. So once again, I believe there is some harmony these days with the growing number of the super light class vehicles. I'm getting a little bit frustrated. I personally don't think that all of those vehicles will survive, despite the fact the market is growing. So interesting times. We had to, of course, also these changes forced us to reconsider our pricing policy, and that started last year under the Roscosmos commercial initiative. So we have achieved very good results on decreasing the price of Soyuz 2 to our customers for all types of missions, like smallsats, bigger satellites, rideshare. So it goes for everyone. But of course, there is a big role of the government. So in order to do that, in order to be successful there, we have to have some backlog of the orders that is placed by the government, like Roscosmos, for example, to the team who produces, designs, and sells Soyuz 2.
Done. So the launch is a high share of the total system cost in a smallsat mission. So how do you see that these will evolve and could be solved in the near future?
We've seen that there's a number of innovations that are reducing the cost, as well as sort of the total enterprise cost for satellite customers, and that's really the key. Is to maximize the revenue of those satellite services and reduce the total burdens. And so, whether it's the cost of the launch itself, or the time that the spacecraft is sitting waiting, or the time that the spacecraft when it's in orbit, can get into operation. All of those factors contribute. So it's a sort of a multiple optimization. And I think we will continue down that route and continue to optimize the cost for our customers, and as well as identify new services that add value to spacecraft customers and their customers.
And Sir Martin, as a small sat manufacturer pioneer, how do you adapt to all these various changes occurring in the market?
Well, I think you have to stay ahead of the curve. That's the key. And it's an interesting environment because to some extent there's a little bit of a race to the bottom in the satellite manufacturing area, where everybody's trying to reduce the prices of the spacecraft down and down and down. I think with a huge amount of investment that's gone into the small sat community, we're going to wait and see what the return on those investments look like, and then which of those, as we've mentioned earlier, turn out to survive. So there's a danger that in the satellite manufacturing sector of the business, that's becoming a very, very tight and competitive market, and trying to achieve very low cost, very tight timescales, and yet high performance and reliability is going to be pretty tough. And so where the business needs to diversify into services alongside manufacturing. Manufacturing is always a very tough thing to make any money out of, I can tell you. So the services, if you find the right service, is the area where you can make better margins. And so for SSTL, we look across that, and that's one of the reasons why we're working now on our lunar communication service business, because we think that's an innovative, futuristic business opportunity where we will be involved both in the manufacture but also the service provision for communications and carrying passengers to the moon as one example of how you diversify and at the same time hopefully innovate. But it's not easy.
And talking more in detail about innovation, so we have just a few minutes left in this panel. So I would like to ask each of you, in your view, moving forward, what innovation, disruptions from a technical or business standpoint do you envision for the small sat market in the coming years? So Angelo, what are your views on this?
Innovation disruption. We saw many of these in the last years. I think that on the application side, for example, thanks to technology disruptions, we believe that small sat will be operated not only for classical applications like Earth observation or IoT or communication, but also for other applications for both civil and military domains. If I applied your question to my reality, let's say that we don't do only launch vehicles, but also, for example, engines for typical satellites, for big satellites. So we can envision we can foresee to adapt our offer also to small satellites, providing them with propulsion, with other services. We can even envisage to develop orbital modules other than Space Rider, also to improve our orbital services to small satellites. I think that we will have to adapt our current offer to this new reality, which is small in size and in volume. This is what I think about innovation. It's more an adaptation to what we are able to do.
Mikhail, what's your view on this? What is the next game changer for the small sat market?
Yeah. So presently, the entire space economy, all this like $400 billion, it's less than 0.3% of the global economy. We're still tiny. For example, like all telecommunication industry, 1.52% of the global economy. So I think like in recent years, the whole space industry waiting, looking. So what will surface a real like a gold rush in space? So what will be the next big application that will move us to trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar space economy? Somebody talking about space communication and all these mega constellations, one of the candidates. But realistically, for all the time of the space exploration, we are doing the same thing in space. We are looking to Earth, we are transmitting bytes, we are collecting information. So nothing new, actually. And the question is, what will be the next thing? Will it be like a manufacturing in space? Will it be the energy production? Will it be like data centers in space, space tourism? And I think this is the main question. When we, as a space economy, move from the existing paradigm of using space only for Earth and providing the same services that have been providing for the last 50 years. And I think we are pretty close to opening this because the main enabler is the transportation cost and the cost of the hardware. And we see that actually orders of magnitude drop in these things. So I would say that this is actually the main question, what will be the space industry in the next 10, 20, 50 years.
And Alexander, what's your view? What are the key technical innovations that we should keep an eye on in the coming years?
Yeah, I'd love to first agree with what Mikhail said. I'd love to see something like that happening pretty soon. My wish personally, I would love to see, moon exploration growing. So I'd love to see people going there back again, setting up the moon bases, and for us having necessity to bring more cargoes up in space, and that would be fantastic for us. So hopefully something like that will happen. There are several plans which we hope won't be stopped or frozen. Particularly, we have a moon exploration program in Russia. So hopefully this will happen, and this will be at least one of the game changers.
Dan, any views, any thoughts on what is the next game changer?
Yeah, well, number one, we're living it right now. I mean, we are living huge innovation. We will be, the day when, not very far from now, when we launch out of Cornwall in the UK, will be a game changer in terms of mobility and ability to bring launch around the globe. We are building the platforms and the capabilities, Sir Martin, and the capabilities that are now being combined into small spacecraft. Those are game changers in terms of space capabilities. What that's going to foster, though, are applications that we haven't even thought about. And that will pull the draw. So when we have a hyperspectral, when we have SAR systems, when we have more EO coverage and have thought about how that interacts with businesses around the world, as we use small satellites for exploration, I mean, there are huge amount of applications and economics and national capabilities for disasters and for fire detection and for, you name it. So there's a huge amount of innovation now, and there will be a burst of applications that cover the whole globe.
Without a doubt, exciting times ahead. We're running out of time, so I would like to thank all of our panelists for your time today and for the great discussion. And I would like also to thank our audience for listening. And with this, I will leave the floor to our events team to introduce the next session and stay connected for that. So thank you all for being here. Thanks.